Happy Orca Month, everybody. Joining us for Orca Month, and I think every day is Orca Month for Ken Balcomb. He is the founder and principal investigator for the Center for Whale Research. Happy Orca Month, Ken.
Happy Orca Month. Thank you, Alan. It's a joy to be here.
Well, I'd like people to know where you are right now and give us a hint about what you're doing for the salmon, which is so important for the orcas.
Well, right now I'm in the shade up here at the Big Salmon Ranch on the Elwha River. It's a 45-acre parcel that I saw was available, and it happens to be right between the two removed dam sites in a area of the river where the salmon are recovering. And I'm just so thrilled and want to celebrate that and be next to it. I don't want to. I was getting kind of tired of telling them the story of whales declining, fish declining. I want to be on the good side of a story. And so here we are, Big Salmon Ranch.
You've been on the job for a long time now, Ken. Center for Whale Research got founded in 1985, but you've been doing orca surveys since 1976. Would you share with people what we're about to see?
Well, what we're about to see is my reading from the log of 8th of April 1976, where we had our first encounter with the southern resident killer whales. It was actually about 10 miles from here off Dungeness Spit. They came past Port Angeles, where we are now, and they went out the Strait of Juan de Fuca. Since then, we've learned their patterns, and this was one of their patterns. There were fish here.
Well, let's watch, and if you want to watch the video in its entirety, you can go to whaleresearch.com.
We began on April Fool's Day, 1976, with a contract to the U.S. National Marine Fisheries Service to study, it was called A Killer Whale Study in Puget Sound and Environs. That was the title of the contract. And it was from April 1st, 1976, April Fool's Day, to 30th September 76. But the government found a little extra money and kept us going through October until Halloween. Beginning in 1972, captures required a permit from the National Marine Fisheries Service that cost $100, and they had to know what the sustainable yield was, as it was argued that they came in and out of Puget Sound all the time. Nobody knew how many there were. And you have to determine what the sustainable yield or the removals could be. Mike Bigg had already done this in Canada, but his numbers were not entirely believed, or his techniques. And besides that, U.S. waters needed to be surveyed. 8th of April, 1976. We started up at 0700 and cast off at 0710 in the drizzly gloom that is typical weather for Port Angeles this time of year. At 0722 we cleared Edith's Hook and set 2850 RPM for Dungeness Spit en route the southern Puget Sound. At 0815, when just off the middle of Dungeness Spit, I spotted killer whales, or Sinus orca, about 1.5 miles ahead and coming our way. So begins the encounter. The initial grouping of the whales was as follows. One large group of about 25 whales was most inshore, and that group consisted of females, young whales, and not so prominent males. Several other smaller groups, consisting of a male and one or two other whales, were further offshore. It was very apparent that the whales were initially concerned with avoiding us. They dove and came up several minutes later, a good long distance astern of us toward Port Angeles. We turned and proceeded toward the large group again, and at a distance of about 400 yards, they porpoised briefly and dove again for several minutes. Both we and the whales did not behave calmly for the first hour. Rain was spoiling our opportunities for photographs, getting our cameras all wet, and dampening our spirits. A school of Phocinoides dali had nonchalantly passed us going east without any apparent reaction from the killer whales. Now, just a side note here that at the time, this is basically a killer whale study. It was not well known that we had two ecotypes here, the meat-eating transients and a fish-eating ecotype known as residents. We sort of were just in the state of forming that knowledge at that time. At 10:30, we observed one subgroup of 22 or 23 whales that came up for about 5 blows. A downtime of 3 minutes, 24 seconds was observed, and then 15 or 16 whales came up for 6 or 7 blows. By 10:43, the school structure had loosened to 2 groups of 6 whales, each with a large male, plus a couple of whales, plus several other groups of 4 or 5 whales, each with a male, plus 3 or 4 whales accompanied by a male, plus a few others. Due to the difficulty of counting numbers of whales that do not all surface at the same time, I can only estimate the total number of whales was about 40. I shot a number of photos, PX5, frames 28 to 33, of a large male whale that had a bite-like chunk missing from the bottom third of its dorsal fin on the posterior margin. Later found this was L8. A female whale with double-notched scars on the posterior margin of her dorsal fin, PX6, frame 7, was up for 6 blows, down for 10 minutes and 35 seconds, up for 10 blows, down for 6 minutes 15 seconds, up for 10 blows, but her behavior seemed to indicate that she was not at ease with our presence. A male that was with her had no real distinctive markings. These 2 whales were presumably feeding, and they were the third flanker group from the outside, or most offshore group. Other whales began, quote, feeding also, and 2 baby whales were left in our immediate vicinity to play and look at us as their mothers were down for long periods of time. One of the babies was only about 8.5 feet long and designated Pink Baby by Camille, and the other was 10 to 11 feet long. At 14:14, we were about 3 miles west of Crescent Rock and passing through areas of kelp with the whales. One male had a long string of kelp draped around its dorsal fin, and another male whale swam directly through a small patch of kelp. Do they enjoy the feel of kelp on their skin? The wind came upon us strong from the east with rain and chill. Reluctantly, we departed the whales at 15:15, about 1.5 miles offshore Twin Rivers, to return to Port Angeles while getting was good. I called Mike Bigg in the evening, and from my description of some of the whales we had seen, he identified the following. Male L8, close saddle, that bite on the lower third of the posterior margin of the fin. Male K5, open saddle with a chevron or sergeant stripes on the saddle pattern. L10, closed saddle with a bite mark up near the top of the dorsal fin, a posterior margin. And male K1 that had 2 notches, made by Mike Bigg et al. In October 1973 when they attached a radio transmitter to this whale nicknamed Taku, and then released him. He was too large for the capture travel. The transmitter was designed to release after 1 month. Mike also said that a school of whales, presumably this group, was reported inbound on the Vancouver Island side of the Strait of Juan de Fuca on Monday, 5 April. He launched from Victoria to intercept them, but apparently the whales did not follow their usual route of traveling past Victoria and up Harrow Strait. Our intercept and documentation of these whales is the first undeniable record of their presence in these waters in the month of April. Mike has records of these resident pod males for each other month of the year. So that was Encounter 1, 1976. So begins Orca Survey.
Now, how fascinating is that? Watching and listening Ken Balcomb's first encounter with the southern resident killer whales back in 1976. So, Ken, we're back a little over 45 years later. Can you compare what was happening then to where we are now?
Well, what was happening then was the southern resident killer whales that we had just named, along with Mike Biggs' collaborative study, were recovering from captures for the display industry. And there were about 70 when we began. We confirmed that with Mike. And the population increased from 1976 through the 80s and then took a little dip and then increased again to almost 100. We estimate there were 120 whales before the captures, and they were on the road to recovery. And then, boom, they started a big decline, and everybody wondered why. Currently, there are 75 whales, counting the babies, and the babies in the initial years weren't counted because they had to survive a year before they got their count, because we knew there was a high mortality, and it's gone even higher. And we wonder what is the cause of that. And the cause is lack of food. The mother can't afford to raise them. And this has happened in that period of our study where their food supply, the Chinook salmon, have basically been depleted in the Salish Sea and in the eastern North Pacific. They're maintained right now on a sort of ICU basis with hatcheries, and that's clearly not working. We need to recover wild salmon. So that's why we're here in the Big Salmon Ranch, to celebrate recovery of wild salmon. It can be done. Fix the rivers and they will come.
Thank you so much, Ken, for your important work and that message today. And I would encourage people, it's so fascinating to see your first encounter. You can go to whaleresearch.com to watch Ken's video in its entirety. So, Ken, before I get tucked into bed here, did you have anything else that you would like to share here for Orca Month?
Well, yes, Alan. It occurs to me that we're not only, I mean, as we celebrate Orca Month and celebrate this recovery of salmon in the Elwha, we're looking at two icon species that we're at serious risk of losing. And that's bad enough, but what we're most at risk losing is our environmental compass. What direction do we want to go? Do we want to go toward this extinction program, or do we want to go toward a recovery program? It really bothers me that our political leaders, I don't hate to get political here, but our leaders and even our bureaucracies are content to lose the needle. Where do we go? What's our direction? I mean, in climate change and in salmon restoration or recovery, and in orca viability, where do we want to go? This is what we all have to take to heart and let our leaders know that, hey, this isn't acceptable to just talk about it. We've got to do something.
Thank you, Ken, for your lifelong dedication to the southern resident killer whales You are a legend, my friend. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you.